Ansa? You know where Ansa is? Ansa Avenue?
No.
Sounds like a road in the Northeast. I don't know.
All right, I'll jump into this.
We're going to jump in now?
Yeah. Fuck you. And you're listening to another episode of Nuance, the podcast featuring both Mike Wood and Roberto Alejandro. And we're joined today by Executive Director Avi Trupp of Civilian-Led Policing, a national nonprofit working to implement Michael A. Wood Jr.'s Civilian-Led Police Reform Model, which is convenient since Mike is here.
Yeah, that is highly convenient. But is that how you say your last name? Trupp?
Trupp. Like
it's Trupp.
Trump without the M.
Trump without
What is
the
it?
M.
Trump.
Trump?
Yes, but without the M.
Trump. No, I said the M. Trop.
Take the M out.
Okay, it's trop. I say trope all the time, so it tells you what I know.
So let's speak a little bit. First, for those who don't quite understand the model, who aren't that familiar with it, I don't know which one of you to direct it at. I suppose, Michael, you're probably the most natural person to explain it. Just explain the basic contours of the idea.
I guess one of the struggles is to find the simplest way for somebody to kind of get the analogy of what it is. I think the closest way we can look at it when it comes to policing is that we see these civilian review boards and we say to ourselves, yes, we should judge on policing when they do something wrong. And the key to there, a lot of people will understand, is like you can't have an appointed person in that position. You can't have somebody that is just voted from the population in a popularity contest, because then you have money buying into it and everything else like you normally would. And so we have to get a representative sample of the community that will direct in that. And that's a challenge to look at. But once we have that kind of board concept, what I then am saying to you is if you are the authority and it makes sense to you that when a cop does the worst thing possible, that you can influence that, then by all means, you should be influencing all the good and what is telling the cop to get there. Because if we're just judging the cop by when they're bad, we're actually screwing them over, because you are thinking that policing should be one way, and then the managers and the mayor that are directing the police officers can be telling them to do A, and then you punish them for doing A, which is understandable, but you should be telling them what to do so that they can have incentives and be judged by how to do it. Because as far as they see it right now, is they're being told to put some 14-year-old kid in jail, but yet if they were to be judged by that by the community or by a videotape, then they're going to get criticized for that. And so they're stuck in that pendulum there. So what I then say is, okay, so who the mayor then should not be directing with these metrics and incentives and telling these officers what good is to them. So we take that and we move that review board all the way up to the top. And you tell the officer what they should be doing and what we can all do as a community, and finally say to yourselves how you will be policed and not be told how you will be policed. That's kind of the overall concept. And what that looks like in every angle, we don't know, because the key is to just think about to yourself, if we were going to decide what you wanted your police to do, the arguments that you can get into with your neighbors about how policing should be. Now, sit 6 of us around with yourself and then discuss about what your police should be doing. Right now, you could be in a sanctuary city saying to yourself, well, I want to protect the immigrants that are in this city. Well, right now, the federal government is going to influence and dictate what that police department does through political means. But if you were in control of that police department, you would say, no, you are going to protect our immigrants that are in this city, and then we will actually have a police department that's protecting and serving what you want them to do. And you're not going to sit there. If Jim's next to you and we're discussing what we're going to do about drug policy, well, we're not going to make a rule where Jim's 13-year-old kid can end up going to jail and having his life tarnished because he had a flower in his pocket. So it's easy to see what we're kind of doing is taking that small sense of community that we can really understand to create the policy that will be applied to everyone. And then we end up with policies that protect the weakest among us. And so that always protects the strongest among us.
I think something that's really interesting and important about this idea is that it incorporates a principle that we know has worked, which is that idea that the community needs to be a sort of mediating influence on the way we think about policy and the law is essentially the function that the jury serves in our criminal justice system. I mean, it obviously doesn't serve that function in an ideal way in every instance, because it's still carried out by imperfect human beings. But the basic idea behind the jury is that while law is supposed to be a reflection of the beliefs and values of the community, its application doesn't always play out that way. And the process of lawmaking doesn't always enable the law to be in the same space as the community. And so what the jury system allows is to ensure that there is still a community voice that determines whether the law is being applied as it was intended to be applied from the perspective of the community. And I think that's a really important principle applied to policing, precisely for the reasons you said, because policy can take years to change, especially today where you can't even get a law passed. And so particularly at the federal level, when you have someone like Trump, they can use so much of what is already on the books, especially in terms of being able to cut off funding to police departments, that having that sort of civilian intermediary could help sort of decrease and mitigate that political pressure and that sort of policy-based pressure that becomes possible. Avi, let me bring you in. Speak a little bit about civilian-led policing, what you're trying to do, and what your strategy is to accomplish it.
All right, so Michael here is the expert and created the model. So all the questions, I guess, when you're trying to figure out exactly what it is, should be going to Michael. My job is more of implementation. So in 2017, it's an off year, so it's unlikely many people are going to be voting. So basically, I look at it this way: is you get a city, you try to get someone to run for mayor or city council. Once they're in, they would be able to implement this model without much hassle. The mayor basically has control anyways, so he can give up control. I'm sure there's differences in each city and how it works. We'd have to figure that out. But the basic concept is to get someone in office and then give up control.
And then what will that effort look like from your side? Are you sort of providing logistical support? Are you providing sort of campaign or maybe education support on the issue itself? How will that look like from your end?
So the official position of the organization is for awareness and to look for people who are interested in it. But we'll be able to make connections to different organizations that we already have those connections to, whether it's providing ground support, actual people to knock on doors, whether it's getting on media through TYT or other progressive media or any media really, and just provide whatever it would take to get them out there and let the message be heard, which is also promoting awareness for our position as it is.
You mentioned progressive media, and obviously police reform is a fight that we generally associate with progressives or the left. But it strikes me as the sort of thing that's not really a liberal conservative issue per se. I mean, the politics may force you into that space regardless, but do you guys see this necessarily as a sort of a progressive versus conservative issue, the nature of policing in America and how it might be reformed?
I mean, I guess that kind of leads into even how Avi comes into the picture at all, because my struggle has been to craft the importance of that message being something that is applicable to everyone, because it is seen as that progressive wing, as in, we glorify police and we want to make them patriot, and we have the nationalistic side of us that wants to protect the police all the time. So if you're attacking nationalist ideas, then you're also attacking conservative ideas. They're kind of interwoven. Yeah. So how do I track these messages? I don't know. I haven't been able to do it fast enough. So I have kind of moved on myself into doing other avenues of activism that I can have faster success with, which is why I'm the executive director of Veteran Stand. And so people keep still asking, how do we do this? What do we do? How do we get civilian-led policing into our area and have it get kicked off? And the only answer is that I can't do it. You have to do it. The people have to do it. So how do they get those networks together? Well, then that's where Avi comes in and tries to, I guess he has to figure that out too, because it's certainly an issue that's applicable to everybody. I mean, Zachary Hammond is a issue I use a lot of times to express to people how the drug war, we kind of can isolate ourselves in royal white America to its harms because it happens to other people in other places, and as long as it's the others getting hurt. But that is spilling over when we see videos like the young white kid Zachary Hammond in the suburbs being killed by the police in the exact same kind of ways as a result of our drug war and the fear involved too. It will get to you, so like now is the time to fight so you don't have to learn for yourself,
Yeah, I mean, just as a follow-up, Mike, as someone who was in law enforcement, And with the trend occurring as it has in terms of the opiate crisis reaching white America in a way that previous drug crises either did not or were not portrayed as doing, do you see the potential for abusive policing if that problem continues to spread and trend the way it has, coming to wider spaces and we've generally seen these types of stories come out of?
Well, so my general concern is that when it hits white neighborhoods, what we end up doing is taking a public health approach and going towards decriminalization because we're empathetic for those people. And that's still not hitting the root cause of what our problem is. Yes, you're mitigating. Yes, it helps people. But it will, whenever you decriminalize, you maintain the criminal element of the black market. So that individual from that white rural neighborhood will still be going into the black city to buy those drugs and maintain the criminal element that allows us to continue to marginalize those neighborhoods and maintain the problem in that neighborhood. So it still creates that black and white divide that we have in America.
And you still haven't sort of intervened in the basic enforcement law and order paradigm either on the policing side, because you haven't actually reformed the way policing is done. What you've said is, hey, police, you don't bust heads for these situations, but you're still here to bust heads.
Yeah, interesting perspective that I hadn't kind of done with it before. What it is really doing is it's broadening the discretionary concept. So where police are allowed, cops don't write speeding tickets to their mother or their brother or something when they accidentally pull. Well, I guess you'd have to be really bad. There are exceptions.
It depends how bad Thanksgiving went.
So in general, you don't write tickets or arrest people you know. And what we're trying to do is broaden that concept that we wouldn't arrest somebody we know for drugs to the rest of the people in our community, but we're still in that limited tribal mentality of discretion being broadened to the global community.
And so, Avi, let me ask you, you're someone who has come out of the progressive political campaign world. What do you see as effective strategies for doing what Mike said, getting people to implement this on their own, right? Because Mike can't do it himself, and I suppose the same is true for you.
So to go back to your question, if it's a political issue, whether it's which side will agree with it or not, it seems that the progressives are on board right away. You just need to explain to them, and they're like, "Oh, that's terrific. Let's do that." When it comes to other people, I've tried to explain it, and they say that the concept kind of makes sense, but I think their biases are saying it's a progressive issue, therefore they have to kind of go against it. But if you actually go to a conservative and say smaller government and talk about it this way, I'm not sure what argument they'd have against it. That's their entire platform. Plus, libertarians should be all for this. So
yeah, I mean, elucidate that a little bit. How does this model create a smaller government, essentially, footprint?
Well, so right now, in some cities, I don't know exactly how it works in all cities, but in some cities, the mayor has control of the police and just decides what to do. If he wants more tickets, then you give more tickets. If you want to, like in New York, they lowered the speed limit to 25, and then they just started giving tickets to everyone who goes 1 mile over 35, and it's just a money grab. So there's full control there. But if you go to the people and say, hey, do you want the speed limit lowered? And they'll be like, no, thank you. We want it the same way it was. It's more control back to the people.
And then speak a little bit just about what are the strategies you think will need to be employed and that will be effective in terms of bringing people together to either put the candidates in office that need to be in office in order for this sort of reform to become a reality, or for those persons to do it on their own, whether through ballot initiative or some other means.
I'm not sure how the ballot initiative will work, but for right now we're targeting people to run for office. We can obviously try to help them win the election, but it's about spreading awareness, and the more the word gets out there about the model, more people will be interested in helping out the candidates who are supporting it or trying to push it through. And the goal is eventually to get enough hype that we can get 1 or 2 cities and use them as test models.
And then do you have cities in mind at this point that you want to use as test models?
We have a couple cities in mind. We don't have anything official yet. We're waiting to hear. We should know in the next week or two.
And then for folks who want to get involved with the effort in some way or contribute in some way, how should they go about that?
Well, right now we have our GoFundMe, Civilian-Led Policing, or you can reach out to civilianledpolicing@gmail.com. We're just getting everything up and running.
And then in terms of what opportunities for involvement are there at this stage? Is it still pretty early, and so sort of we'll take names and get back to you, or do you have some things that you're going to need up front?
So for the organizational structure, that's good. We'll take names and we'll figure out what's going on. But as to talking to candidates around the country, we'll do that. That's exactly what we're looking for. We've been doing that for a while now. So if you have someone or you know someone that's interested, just connect us. That's really what we need.
And then, Mike, speak a little bit, what role will you play in this effort under civilian-led policing?
I'm not exactly sure. I guess that would be up to the city individually. That would, I don't know.
It's time to get that consultant money.
Sure. I am thinking consultant, so way to throw me out like that. But I don't think I have the time to do more than put the model in and understand the framework. But the big thing about this, and the point of it is I don't know. I'll never be able to tell you what it looks like in its final iteration, because what I'm espousing to you is that you need to use this as a methodology, as a framework to develop policing for your individual city, for your individual needs, and how things evolve, because we have a built-in model where you're going to review it every 5 years, so you constantly are refreshing what it means to you with the reality of your situations. So I will guide everybody through, but I really don't need to do more than kind of push people in the right direction, because it's not about what I want. It is about what you want. And I just want to show you how you can make that work.
Let me just ask, because we have this interesting divide in this country between our urban and non-urban spaces, which as a function of our history of segregation especially, urban spaces, while they still are in many ways often defined by segregation, at least in terms of where many communities live, urban spaces inevitably mean people are sort of interacting, or at least hanging out around each other, if for nothing else. Whereas a lot of other communities, suburbs, rural spaces can be much more homogenous. Is there any concern that this model might make more sense in those diverse spaces where the community input has to sort of take into account more things than in some of those smaller suburban or rural spaces where the values being more homogenous, the policing might inevitably look more like what the community wants it to look like anyway?
I mean, that's why you have departments now in homogenous areas that don't have a problem abusing their citizens. But that's not because they have a good police model. It's because they don't have the bias being expressed because of the society that they're in. This is always a conversation, because when people will say, well, what police department do we use? What kind of models are out there? Well, all the really good models are homogenous societies.
Yeah.
So I'm not confident taking the information out of them as being applicable to a general population. What I think will really happen in reality, so it'd be interesting if a royal department was the one that decided to do it first. It would kind of mess up my idea of how it would progress. But I imagine that one city will do it. That city will end up being in a huge financial boom because they have all the proprietary data that we develop software out of, which is a huge selling point. I don't know why somebody wouldn't do that for their own myopic purposes.
Sure.
So once you have all that data in place and we put it in, we're going to do something that's representative of the community. And a police department may be a very complex thing in an urban environment like it is now. I imagine that once they realize that civilian-led policing works and they bring it to a royal agency, a royal area, I'm going to think that they will suddenly find out they don't need 50 cops. They might need 5.
5, yeah.
And so policing in rural Idaho just might not really be a thing. It's an emergency response, just like a fire department in those areas. You may just come to find out that, because really, by the time the cops could get there anyway, the neighbor probably handled it, from a mile down handled it, or you don't get in interactions, because, you can be a crazy farmer dude in Iowa, be homicidal and ready to kill somebody at any point in time, but the odds of you being in an exchange with another human being are pretty freaking low. So it does really change the dynamics of what things are.
And then, Avi, let me just ask you, if you can, speak a little bit about yourself and what brought you to this issue.
Okay, so I was working on the campaign for Alex Law. He was running in South Jersey, including the city of Camden. We lost the election pretty big.
That happens.
But we got a decent percentage of the vote, and we kind of went up against the biggest machine in New Jersey and took a big swing. We made a crack in their wall. And I saw that there was a future in continuing to make those cracks. And Camden was a city that's just been ignored forever, even by politicians in New Jersey who just pretend.
Yeah, and to the point that it had to have its own police department dissolved.
So right now they have the county police doing their things. We suspect it might be because they wanted to use the stats of the county to show that Camden's gotten better. They mix in the stats to make it look better. But
that's one way to do it. Yeah,
that's I guess that could be part of it. But I heard Mike on the Joe Rogan podcast. I thought that's a terrific idea. Camden's the perfect place to do this. So I reached out and thought, let's try to get this done here.
What is your sense in Camden of the relationship of the city to being policed by the county police force? Has that kind of addressed some of the concerns that existed, or has that been sort of a Band-Aid?
Honestly, I can't really speak on this. I've talked to a bunch of different people about this, and everyone has a different view on what this is. No one really knows what's going on. It's not like they're very outgoing with their information. The government of that part of the state is not very forthcoming with their information.
Yeah, and I suppose this is a question for both of you, but Avi, as the executive director of civilian-led policing, it does seem almost like you have to bypass the established political class if you have any hope of this, right? In most places in America.
You have to stay away from it completely. The establishment's not going to touch this. I mean, we saw this with Michael applying for Chicago or Oakland or San Francisco. It's just not going to happen.
And so, in your mind, what does the timeline look like? When do you think we could have somewhere a pilot, civilian-led policing?
I think it's possible to do it with this election. You just get one person to win in one city, and then you can implement it. So June, possibly.
Well, excellent. I mean, I wish you both the best of luck. June might be, I think, very optimistic, but you're right. I mean, it really is as simple as, and this has always struck me about our politics in America. If you elect different type of leadership, you will get different type of leadership, right? If you elect kind of from the same pool of candidates who largely look like one another, you will get a situation that kind of looks the same. And it's always striking to me that people rarely want to stray away from what they've become used to.
Right. So actually, to that point, when you say that June might be a little optimistic, it's an off year. And I said that before, but no one votes generally. And
That's
then
right.
even in the congressionals, in the midterms, no one votes. But in the years where nothing's going on, no one votes.
Yeah.
In mayoral elections, that means a couple thousand votes is all you need, and this entire concept can be done for just a couple of thousand votes. It really is as simple as that. Now, obviously, getting that done is a lot harder to do, but a couple thousand votes is really all we need.
I hope Avi can get a couple thousand votes and make it happen. I mean, because that's the answer that why I kind of passed up on it is like I'm clearly not going to infiltrate the establishment, so there has to be a way around it, and I guess Avi will be the one to put those puzzle pieces together. And if he does do it fast and I'm not ready, then that's another one of those things that are a good problem to have to deal with.
That's right. Yeah, cross that bridge when you get to it. But it does seem then that this is something that if it's done smart, you target the right spaces in the right years. Could be done with fewer resources than you would have to try to do it in Baltimore.
Right. So just as an example, on our campaign, when running for Congress, we knocked on over 100,000 doors. To say we can't replicate that just in the city of Camden, which is 70,000 people.
Yeah.
You just need to knock on every door 5 times. It really is as simple as that. When you talk to organizers, they're constantly talking about knocking on doors and making phone calls. There's a reason for that. It works. People, when you talk to them, they actually give a shit.
There it is. So I hope more people will give a shit. Thank you so much for joining us, Avi.
Thank you.
And you've listened to another episode of Nuance with Michael Wood and Roberto Alejandro.
Yes, you have. And I'm just going to do my best to make every intro and outro awkward for you by giving you some weird look or saying something offhand.
Always up for their challenge.